You know that feeling when you're trying to learn about some incredible historical monument? Maybe you're stuck in a huge tour group, you can barely hear the guide, or maybe you're in a lecture hall, and it just feels like the information is washing over you.
Yeah.
It's just tough to really connect, right?
Yeah.
There's often this kind of barrier, real-world distractions, not getting feedback in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It can leave you feeling like, well, you've only scratched the surface.
Absolutely. And think about those guided tours. The guide is, they're doing their best, of course, but it's almost impossible for them to know if everyone's really getting it,
Okay.
getting the significance of what they're seeing.
Right.
And let's be honest, even a really great speaker they can struggle to hold our attention when our minds just wander off so easily.
Exactly. And, while the internet has tons of information, just clicking through websites or watching videos can sometimes feel a bit, detached.
Yeah, passive.
You miss that spark, that real engagement. But what if you could, actually step into the past, become part of the story, explore these amazing historical sites in a way that really pulls you in?
Well, that is exactly the kind of exciting territory that's explored in this fascinating new research article we've been looking at.
Yeah.
We've been diving into role-playing monument exploration, an online educational game with a role-playing mechanism and multi-dimensional scaffolding for monument tours. It's by Lu, Chan, and Hao, and it just came out in Education Tech Research Dev this past February.
Okay. Role-playing monument exploration,
Yeah.
Quite a title. So let's get right to it. What were these researchers trying to figure out? What was the big question here?
Well, their main goal was really to see if a game-based learning approach, specifically an online role-playing game, could be, a more effective way to learn about historical monuments compared to the usual methods.
Right.
They were particularly interested in how adding role-playing and something they call multi-dimensional scaffolding could maybe make the learning more engaging and lead to, a deeper connection with the history itself.
Multi-dimensional scaffolding. Okay,
Yeah.
That sounds interesting. We'll definitely need to unpack that. But before we do, let's just nail down why they felt this was needed. It's not just us feeling that traditional ways can be a bit flat, is it? The article actually cites research on this.
Exactly, yeah. For those real-life guided tours we were just talking about, the authors point to studies going back quite a way, like Boudrouk and colleagues in 2008, Ackerman et al. 2009, and Chang et al. In 2015. And this research basically suggests that just, listening to someone talk, even while standing right there in a historic place, isn't always the best way to learn. All the noise, the crowds, the guide trying to cater to everyone, it can really get in the way of learning.
It's so true. You're trying to absorb these historical facts while also, not tripping over someone or trying to get a good photo.
Yep.
Your brain's trying to do too many things at once. And what about the online options? The existing ways to learn about monuments online?
Right. Well, the article mentions Cabeza's work from 2017, which points out a pretty key limitation. Often, there's just not enough interaction. When you're just clicking through, passively soaking up information, there's no real give and take, no way to actively grapple with it.
Okay.
And that, can lead to motivation dropping off and ultimately maybe not understanding things as deeply.
So it's not enough just to put the info online. That active part, maybe the human connection, is often missing.
Precisely. The researchers really stress the need for learning experiences that properly pull the learner in, let them get immersed in the historical events around the monument. And they also mention the benefits of learning together, collaboratively with peers. They cite research from Andreoli et al. In 2017 and Schellner and Madma in 2019 on that.
Okay, so the challenges are pretty clear. Passive learning, distractions, not enough sport, not enough interaction. So this brings us to their idea, game-based learning. We hear a lot about games in education, but how does it specifically tackle these issues for learning about monuments?
Well, game-based learning, which Prinsky talked about way back in 2003, is really all about weaving fun, interactive game stuff together with the learning activities intentionally.
Right.
The idea is by making learning enjoyable and dynamic, you can tap into that sort of inner drive to learn. And research, like from Hung et al. In 2014, Fo and Dinscore in 2015, and Yin et al. In 2011, has shown that games can actually boost motivation, make learning feel less scary, and just create a more positive attitude towards the subject.
That makes sense. When you're actually enjoying yourself, you're naturally more open to taking things in. The article also gives some cool examples of how games have already been used for monuments and culture, doesn't it?
Yes, they highlight a few interesting ones. For instance, Hasibuan and colleagues back in 2011 made a village simulation game to teach about local culture and historical sites. Then you've got mobile games, like from Loon Wang in 2016 and Lin et al. In 2018, that actually get players exploring their real surroundings to learn about local culture for the game.
Oh, neat.
And even VR, virtual reality games, like one by Ijeya Vivancos and Arias Fair in 2021, used VR to drop learners into historical places to solve problems and reflect.
So using game to connect with history isn't totally brand new, but the article also warns that you can't just sprinkle some game elements on top of history facts and expect magic, right?
Exactly right. As Cheng and Kwang pointed out in 2019, and Cheng and Su said back in 2012, for game-based learning to really be effective, the learning goals and the actual history content have to be properly baked into the game mechanics.
Okay.
It's not just playing a game set near a monument. The gameplay itself needs to drive the understanding.
Got it. Which brings us back to the core idea in this study. Combining role-playing with this multi-dimensional scaffolding. Let's take scaffolding first. We hear that term a lot in education. What does it actually mean for someone learning in this kind of game?
Yeah, it's a key concept. And think of scaffolding, as Wood and his colleagues described it way back in '76, as the support that a teacher, or in this case, the learning environment, provides. And it's tailored to what the learner can currently do.
Okay.
It builds on Vygotsky's idea of the zone of proximal development, that sweet spot just beyond what you can manage alone, but where you can succeed with a little help.
Right, like training wheels.
Exactly like training wheels. The goal of scaffolding is to help you bridge that gap. Then, ideally, the support fades as you get better.
Okay. And why is this so crucial in educational games, according to the article?
Well, research from folks like Barzilai and Blau in 2014, Chen and Law in 2016, and Hu et al. Just last year shows that good scaffolding in games helps learners build skills, tackle challenges that might otherwise just be frustrating, and helps them stay in that really absorbed state, what we'll talk about later as flow.
Gotcha. Okay, now the multi-dimensional part, that sounds like they're different kinds of help.
Exactly. The article first separates them into static and dynamic. Static scaffolds are like built-in resources, always there. Dynamic ones adapt based on what the learner is doing right then.
Okay.
Then they break it down further. There's procedural scaffolding, basically step-by-step guides on how to do tasks. That's from Davis, 2006.
Right.
Then cognitive scaffolding, which helps with understanding concepts and solving problems. Howe and King, 2021, looked at that.
Makes sense.
There's emotional scaffolding, which is about keeping learners motivated, managing frustration. Rosie talked about that in 2003.
Interesting.
Metacognitive and strategic scaffolding help you plan how you're going to learn and check your own understanding. Hannafin and colleagues discussed that in '99. And even just interacting with your teammates, your peers, can be a scaffold learning from each other. Suasini et al. mentioned that in 2021. So yeah, it's a really comprehensive way of thinking about support.
That is comprehensive. It sounds like a really well thought out game could layer all of that in quite seamlessly. Now let's switch to the role-playing part. How does pretending to be a historical character actually help you learn about a monument?
Well, the article connects this to the potential of virtual worlds and the metaverse. Citing research by Dwayvia et al. In 2022, Kai et al. In 21, Su and An in 22, and Fakamak et al. Also in 22. These technologies let you create these really immersive experiences where you almost feel like you're stepping back in time.
Yeah.
And when learners actively take on these historical roles, like Ackerman et al., suggested in 2009, and Chan et al., confirmed more recently in 2023, it can lead to a much deeper understanding. And, maybe more importantly, a stronger emotional connection to what was happening back then. It's like you're not just hearing about it, you're sort of experiencing it.
It's like method acting for history class. I can totally see how embodying a character could give you a completely different viewpoint.
Exactly. And this ties neatly into the idea of situated learning,
Oh.
which Brown and colleagues introduced back in '89 and Leigh Van Wenger developed further in '91. Situated learning basically says that learning works best when it happens in real, authentic situations, through doing things, interacting, mixing the knowledge with the context.
Right, not just abstract facts.
Precisely. And research specifically in monument education by people like Leah et al. In 2021, No Fall et al. In 2020, and Pombo et al. In 2019 supports this. When learning is embedded in a relevant scenario, it just sticks better, it's more meaningful.
And the role-playing also tackles that issue we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
About the lack of kind of peer interaction in online learning.
Absolutely. Simpson and Anderson pointed out how important that human connection is in online settings way back in 2012. And the article suggests that when learners are playing roles, interacting as those roles within the game's story, it can really boost their motivation and encourage collaboration. That's backed up by findings from Moreno-Guerrero et al. In 2020 and Ferrero et al. In 2018. They're not just passively getting info, they're actively working together on a shared goal within that historical setting.
Okay, so we have scaffolding, providing support, role-playing, creating immersion, and teamwork. The article also brings up flow quite a bit. What exactly is flow, and why does it matter for learning?
Right, flow. It's a concept pioneered by Csikszentmihalyi. Flow is that state where you're completely absorbed, totally focused on what you're doing.
Like being in the zone.
Exactly, being in the zone. It's where the challenge of what you're doing feels perfectly matched to your skills. Nakamura and Csikszentmihalyi talked about that balance in 2009. Think about a time you were so into something, maybe playing music or coding or even a sport, that you just lost all track of time.
Yeah, definitely.
That's flow. And research by Urhel and Jamet in 2019 and Lin and Wang in 2022 shows that being in flow is strongly linked to being more motivated and actually learning better. When you're in flow, learning almost feels, well, effortless.
That feeling of being totally present, I could absolutely see how that would help you learn.
Exactly. And as Chang et al. In 2022 and Keeley et al. In 2021 pointed out, scaffolding plays a really big part in helping learners get into flow and stay there.
Oh, so?
By giving just the right amount of support, it makes sure the challenge stays interesting but doesn't become overwhelming or frustrating.
Ah, okay. Keeps you in that sweet spot.
Precisely. And the article mentions how this has been applied in games and history learning before, citing work by Cheng et al. In 2016, Taragiras and Newman in 2017, and Chu et al. In 2019.
Okay, so all these pieces of role-playing, the multidimensional scaffolding aiming for flow, they all come together in this studies framework for teaching about monuments. And to test it, they actually built the game, didn't they? Tell us about this 1946 space exploration game.
Yes, they did. They created this educational game using a platform called GatherTown. It's based around a real military monument in northern Taiwan. And the whole point is to take learners back to 1946, right when the monument was established. Both the learners and the guides take on roles of historical characters from that era.
Wow.
And they actually participate in events related to that time period within the game.
So it's way more than just a virtual walkthrough. There's a story, roles. What kinds of things did the learners actually do in the game?
So the game was broken into 15-minute stages. And in each stage, teams of 3 learners had specific tasks. Things like figuring out where to place facilities on the military base,
Okay.
planning patrol routes for guards, identifying spots where attackers might come from. They had to follow orders from a commander played by a guide, explore the virtual space, look closely at the terrain, find clues, all to help them complete their objective.
And how do they weave in all those different types of scaffolding we talked about earlier? The cognitive, procedural, emotional.
They did it in some really clever ways. For cognitive support, you had static things like just the visual appearance of the buildings, specific observation points with real historical photos and text info, and the layout of the game map itself. Then dynamically, you had soldier characters also played by guides who could offer historical facts or hints if the learners asked.
Got it.
For procedural help, there were static tips on a whiteboard, but also dynamic guidance from those soldier NPCs on how to actually do the tasks, step by step if needed.
Okay. And emotional. How do you scaffold emotion in a game?
Yeah, that's interesting. They did it mainly through the role-playing of the soldier and commander NPCs. They acted in character, or virtual military uniforms used the right kind of tone and language.
Immersion.
Exactly. Plus, they had invader NPCs pop up sometimes, creating a sense of uncertainty and, well, engagement.
Kept them on their toes.
Right. For strategic scaffolding, there was a static game map on a whiteboard learners could use for planning together, and dynamically, the commander NPC would give feedback on their plans and guide their strategy.
Okay.
And finally, pure scaffolding just happened naturally through the teamwork. The 3 learners in each team had to discuss, collaborate, figure things out together.
That sounds incredibly well designed. Really immersive, hitting all those support types. Was there like a scoring system? How did they know if they were doing well?
Yep, they had a system based on merits and rewards. Learners earned points for getting tasks right, for communicating well within their team, and also for being alert and responding when those invader NPCs showed up.
Okay, so they built this really complex, theoretically grounded game. They put it head-to-head with a more traditional online guide approach. What happened? What did the research actually find?
Right, the results. They looked at a few key things. Learning effectiveness, how much people actually learned, their sense of flow during the activity, their motivation, and also their experience collaborating and understanding the history.
Okay, so learning first.
Okay, learning effectiveness. Both groups, the game group, the experimental one, and the traditional online guide group, the control, both showed significant improvement in their knowledge from before to after.
Good.
But interestingly, there wasn't a significant difference between the two groups in terms of how much they learned overall.
Huh. So the game was just as good as the traditional method for pure knowledge gain.
Exactly. At least in this study, it held its own in terms of conveying the facts.
Okay. What about being in the zone, that flow state?
Right, flow. Both groups reported feeling a significant amount of flow, but there were some differences in the quality of that flow. The game group showed a significantly stronger sense of their actions and awareness merging like they really felt part of the game world. And they also experienced less time distortion. They were less aware of time passing compared to the control group.
Interesting. So more immersed in the moment.
Seems like it. Suggests the game players were more deeply focused on the activity itself. But there wasn't a significant difference in the overall reported level of flow between the groups or in losing self-consciousness.
Okay. So similar overall flow, but maybe a more intense present moment kind of flow in the game. What about motivation? Did the game motivate people more?
This is where the game seemed to have a bit of an edge. The experimental group, the game players, showed a significant increase in their motivation from before they started playing to while they were actually in the game. That increase wasn't seen in the control group using the traditional guide, but when they compared the overall motivation levels between the two groups, there wasn't a significant difference there either.
So the game gave them a motivational boost right at the start, but maybe overall motivation levels ended up similar.
That's what it suggests. The game seems better at sparking that immediate, in-the-moment motivation, getting people engaged right away.
That initial spark is really important, though, getting people invested. Okay, lastly, what about collaboration and understanding the historical context?
Right. Here, there was a significant difference, specifically in how helpful they found analyzing the historical context. The control group, using the traditional guide, actually found analyzing the context less helpful. But when the researchers looked at the qualitative feedback, the comments from the game group, they found players felt really immersed in the history. They were actively looking for clues about the context. And many felt the role-playing itself really helped them understand the historical information more deeply.
And the control group?
The control group seemed more focused on just getting the task answers correct during their collaboration, rather than really digging into the why, the historical context behind it all.
That's a really key distinction. So the game encouraged a deeper dive into the meaning, not just the facts.
It seems that way. It fostered more engagement with the bigger picture.
So, pulling all these findings together, what was the big takeaway conclusion from the researchers?
Their main conclusion was that this online role-playing game, the one with the multidimensional scaffolding, definitely seems to offer advantages when it comes to boosting that immediate motivation and enhancing the feeling of flow compared to a traditional online guide.
Right.
And while the amount of straight factual learning was similar, the game showed more characteristics of that situated learning idea, suggesting it offers a richer, more context-driven learning experience.
It really does sound like a promising direction.
Yeah.
But, like all research, I assume they noted some limitations or areas for future work.
Absolutely. They were upfront about the relatively small number of participants being a limitation.
Okay.
They also mentioned the practical challenge of making sure the instructors playing those NPC roles deliver the scaffolding consistently every time. That's tricky.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And for future research, they suggested looking more closely at how emotions play a role in learning in these kinds of games. Also exploring differences between doing this solo versus in groups, and maybe doing more fine-grained analysis of exactly how the teams collaborate within the game.
Makes sense. Lots more to explore there. So, okay, let's bring it home. What are the key insights you think someone listening should really take away from our deep dive into this study?
I think the biggest takeaway is the real potential here for game-based learning, especially when you combine it with role-playing and that really thoughtful, multi-layered scaffolding to make learning about history and monuments genuinely more engaging and motivating.
Yeah.
It offers a path towards a more interactive, more immersive experience that seems to address some real weaknesses in traditional approaches.
And even though this specific study found similar knowledge gain compared to a standard online guide, that boost and flow, that spark of motivation the game provided, it really points towards an exciting way forward for designing learning experiences, doesn't it?
Exactly. And it leaves us, and you listening, with a really interesting question to think about. How could we take these ideas, immersion, interaction, role-playing, smart support, and apply them to transform learning in other areas too? And maybe even more profoundly, how could this kind of approach change our fundamental connection to the past, deepen how we understand our shared history and culture? It feels like a step beyond just being told about history towards actually, well, experiencing a little piece of it.